Kang Woo-jin pressed his face against the cold metal of his emergency shelter and listened to the wind howl outside. 3 days had passed since his survey ship crashed on Valdris Prime, and he was starting to think nobody would find him in time. The crash had been sudden. One moment he was running atmospheric readings for the terraforming project, and the next moment alarms were screaming as his ship spun out of control. The planet's magnetic storms had fried his navigation systems. He barely managed to activate the emergency landing sequence before everything went black. When he woke up, his ship was scattered across a rocky canyon. Most of the important equipment was broken. His communication array was completely destroyed. The emergency beacon was working, but it would take weeks for anyone to reach this remote sector of space. Woo-jin was a terraforming engineer, not a survival expert. He knew how to build atmospheric processors and design weather control systems. He did not know how to survive on one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. Valdris Prime was famous for all the wrong reasons. The weather changed without warning. Acid storms could strip flesh from bone in minutes. The local wildlife was even worse. Every creature on this planet seemed designed to kill anything that moved. The worst of all were the shadowpaws. Even veteran space marines avoided planets where shadowpaws lived. They were massive wolf-like creatures with metallic fur and glowing markings on their bodies. They hunted in packs and could take down ships with their claws. Their bite could crush steel. Woo-jin had read the reports. Shadowpaws were smart, maybe as smart as humans. They used tactics when they hunted. They set traps. They worked together to surround their prey. No one had ever survived a direct encounter with a shadowpaw pack. The thought made him check his weapon again. He had one plasma pistol with 2 energy cells. Against a shadowpaw, it would be about as useful as throwing rocks. On the morning of his 4th day, Woo-jin decided he had to leave his shelter. His water was running low and he needed to find a better place to wait for rescue. The canyon walls might protect him from the worst storms, but they also blocked his emergency signals. He packed his few working tools into a backpack and started climbing toward higher ground. The rocks were sharp and loose. Every step was dangerous, but staying in one place meant certain death. Halfway up the canyon wall, he heard something that made him freeze. It was a sound like crying, but not human crying. It was high-pitched and desperate, like a young animal in pain. Woo-jin's first thought was to keep climbing. Whatever was making that noise could be dangerous. But the sound continued, and it tugged at something deep in his chest. He had always been the type of person who helped others, even when it was not smart. He followed the sound to a pile of fallen rocks. The crying was coming from underneath. Woo-jin could see a small space between the boulders, just big enough for something small to be trapped inside. He got down on his hands and knees and peered into the darkness. 2 bright blue eyes stared back at him. It was a shadowpaw cub. Woo-jin's heart stopped. Even a baby shadowpaw could probably kill him. But as he looked closer, he could see the little creature was hurt. One of its legs was bent at a wrong angle. There was dried blood on its silver fur. The cub tried to growl at him, but it came out as more of a squeak. It was scared and in pain, probably no more dangerous than a regular puppy. Woo-jin sat back on his heels and thought about what to do. The smart thing would be to walk away. Leave the cub and keep climbing. But looking at those frightened blue eyes, he found he could not do it. His grandmother had always told him that you could judge a person by how they treated those who could not help themselves. This cub could not help itself. It was going to die slowly under those rocks unless someone freed it. Woo-jin pulled out his engineering tools. The rocks were heavy, but he had equipment designed to move much heavier things. He attached lifting cables to the largest boulder and used his portable winch to slowly raise it. The cub watched him work, its cries getting quieter. It seemed to understand that he was trying to help. It took 2 hours to clear enough rocks to reach the trapped animal. When Woo-jin finally pulled the cub free, it was even smaller than he had thought. It could not weigh more than 20 pounds. Its fur was the color of moonlight, with bright blue markings along its sides that pulsed weakly with bioluminescent light. The cub's left rear leg was definitely broken. There were cuts on its body from the sharp rocks, but its eyes were alert, and it did not seem to have any serious internal injuries. Woo-jin set the cub down gently and reached for his medical kit. The cub tried to crawl away but could not get far with its injured leg. When Woo-jin reached toward it, the cub bared tiny fangs and tried to bite him. "Easy there, little one," Woo-jin said softly. "I am trying to help you." The cub did not understand his words, but something in his tone seemed to calm it down. It stopped trying to bite and let him examine its injuries. Wu Jin had basic medical training, enough to treat human injuries in emergency situations. He hoped it would be enough for a shadow paw cub. He cleaned the cuts with antiseptic and bandaged them carefully. For the broken leg, he made a small splint from pieces of his broken equipment. The cub whimpered during the treatment but did not try to bite him again. When he was finished, it looked up at him with what almost seemed like gratitude. Wu Jin realized he was now faced with a bigger problem. He could not just leave the cub here. It was too young to survive on its own, especially with a broken leg. But taking it with him was dangerous. If adult shadowpaws found him with their young, they would kill him without hesitation. The cub solved the problem for him. When he stood up to leave, it started crying again. It tried to follow him, dragging its splinted leg behind it. The sight broke his heart. "All right," he said. "I guess you are coming with me." He picked up the cub carefully and put it inside his jacket. It was warm and surprisingly soft. The blue markings on its fur pulsed brighter when he touched it, like a cat purring. As he continued climbing, Wu Jin wondered what he had gotten himself into. He was stranded on a deadly planet with limited supplies. Now he was carrying around the baby of the most feared predator in the galaxy. But looking down at the small face peeking out of his jacket, he found he did not regret his decision. The cub had stopped crying and seemed content to let him carry it. Its blue eyes looked at him with complete trust. "I guess I should give you a name," Wu Jin said. "How about Dal? It means moon in my language. You are the color of moonlight." The cub made a small chirping sound as if it approved. By the time the sun set, Wu Jin had found a good place to make camp. It was a shallow cave that would protect them from wind and rain. He used his portable heater to warm the space and shared his emergency rations with Dal. The cub ate hungrily, its small fangs making quick work of the protein bars. When it was full, it curled up against Wu Jin's side and went to sleep. As Wu Jin listened to Dal's quiet breathing, he realized his whole situation had changed. He was no longer just trying to survive until rescue came. Now he was responsible for keeping this small creature alive too. It should have made things harder. Instead, somehow it made him feel stronger. He had a purpose now beyond just staying alive. He had someone depending on him. Outside the cave, something howled in the distance. It was a deep, powerful sound that made the rocks vibrate. Somewhere out there, adult shadowpaws were hunting. Wu Jin pulled Dal closer and checked his weapon one more time. Tomorrow he would have to find food and water for both of them. He would have to figure out how to survive on this hostile world while protecting a baby predator. But tonight, listening to Dal's peaceful breathing, he felt oddly hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, they could both make it through this alive. The next morning, Wu Jin woke up to find Dal trying to chew on his boot. The little shadow paw had somehow managed to crawl out of his jacket during the night without waking him up. Despite the splint on its leg, Dal seemed much stronger than the day before. "Good morning to you too," Wu Jin said, gently pulling his boot away from the sharp little teeth. "I guess you are feeling better." Dal looked up at him and made a chirping sound. The blue markings along its sides pulsed brighter, which Wu Jin was starting to think meant the cub was happy or excited. Wu Jin checked his supplies while Dal explored the small cave. His food would last maybe 10 more days if he was careful. His water would run out much sooner. Today, he had to find a reliable water source, and he had to figure out what Dal could eat besides his emergency rations. When he started packing his gear, Dal hobbled over and sat next to his feet. The cub looked up at him expectantly as if waiting for instructions. "You want to come with me?" Wu Jin asked. "It might be dangerous out there." Dal chirped again and tried to follow when Wu Jin moved toward the cave entrance. The cub was determined to stay with him, broken leg or not. Wu Jin decided it was probably safer to keep Dal close anyway. If he left the cub alone and adult shadowpaws found it, they might think he had hurt it. He fashioned a carrier from part of his jacket, so Dal could ride on his chest without putting weight on its injured leg. The weather was clear when they left the cave, which was a relief. Wu Jin had seen what the acid storms could do to exposed metal. He did not want to find out what they would do to living flesh. Dal proved to be surprisingly helpful as they traveled. The cub's senses were much sharper than Wu Jin's. When they approached a stream, Dal started chirping excitedly before Wu Jin could even hear the water. When dangerous rockfalls threatened overhead, Dal would growl softly and press against Wu Jin's chest, warning him to change direction. At the stream, Wu Jin tested the water carefully with his portable analyzer. It was clean and safe to drink. He filled his water containers while Dal played at the edge of the stream, splashing with its good paw and trying to catch small fish. Watching Dal play made Wu Jin smile for the first time since the crash. Despite everything that had happened, the cub still acted like a normal baby animal. It was curious about everything and found joy in simple things like running water and sunlight. When Dal caught a small fish, Wu Jin realized he had found a solution to their food problem. The cub devoured the fish eagerly, bones and all. If Dal could eat the local fish, that was one less mouth competing for the emergency rations. Wu Jin spent the afternoon making tools for fishing and hunting. He used pieces from his broken equipment to build traps and spears. His engineering background helped him design simple but effective devices. Dal watched everything he did with intense curiosity. The cub seemed to understand that Wu Jin was making things to help them survive. When Wu Jin tested his fish trap in the stream, Dal positioned itself downstream and tried to chase fish toward the trap. By evening, they had caught enough fish to feed Dal and supplement Wu Jin's rations. They found another cave to shelter in for the night, this one closer to the water source. As they settled down to sleep, Dal curled up against Wu Jin's side again. But this time, the cub stayed awake longer, watching the cave entrance with alert blue eyes. Wu Jin realized Dal was trying to guard him while he slept. Over the following days, their partnership grew stronger. Dal's leg healed quickly, much faster than a human bone would have mended. Soon the cub was walking normally, though Wu Jin kept the splint on for extra protection. Dal learned to respond to simple commands in Korean. When Wu Jin said stay, the cub would sit and wait. When he said come, Dal would run to his side. The cub seemed to enjoy learning and would chirp happily when it got something right. More importantly, Dal started teaching Wu Jin about survival on Valdris Prime. The cub could smell approaching storms hours before Wu Jin's instruments detected them. Dal knew which plants were safe to touch and which ones would burn skin on contact. When predators were nearby, Dal would press close to Wu Jin and make a specific low growling sound that meant danger. Wu Jin learned to trust Dal's instincts completely. When the cub indicated they should take shelter, he did so immediately even if the sky looked clear. When Dal avoided certain areas, Wu Jin followed the cub's lead without question. Their communication system developed naturally. Dal used different sounds for different situations. Excited chirps for good things like food or water, warning growls for danger, and soft trilling sounds when it was content or asking for attention. Wu Jin learned to recognize each sound and respond appropriately. In return, Wu Jin taught Dal about human technology. The cub was fascinated by his tools and equipment. Dal learned that the portable heater meant warmth and the water analyzer meant safe drinking water. The cub even learned to help with simple tasks, using its mouth to carry small items or hold things steady while Wu Jin worked. 2 weeks after finding Dal, Wu Jin fell seriously ill. He woke up one morning with a high fever and stomach cramps. By midday, he could barely stand. He recognized the symptoms from his survival training. He had been infected by a local parasite, probably from something he ate or drank. Dal seemed to understand that something was wrong. The cub stayed close to Wu Jin, pressing its warm body against him when chills shook his body. But as the day wore on and Wu Jin got worse, Dal became increasingly agitated. That evening, Dal disappeared. Wu Jin was too sick to follow or even call out. He lay in their cave, burning with fever, and wondered if Dal had finally decided to leave him. Maybe the cub had realized that staying with a sick human was too dangerous. As night fell, Wu Jin's condition worsened. He drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes thinking he heard Dal calling for him in the distance, sometimes sure he was just imagining things. When dawn came, Dal returned. The cub rushed into the cave carrying something in its mouth, several types of plants that Wu Jin had never seen before. Dal dropped the plants next to him and made urgent chirping sounds, pushing the vegetation toward Wu Jin's face with its nose. Wu Jin was too weak to argue. He chewed the bitter leaves and roots, trusting that Dal knew what it was doing. Within an hour, his fever started to break. By evening, he was sitting up and drinking water. Within 2 days, he was completely recovered. Later, when he was strong enough to think clearly, Wu Jin realized what had happened. Dal had somehow known exactly which plants would cure his illness. The cub had ventured out alone, despite being young and still recovering from its own injuries, to find the specific medicine Wu Jin needed. That night, as they sat by their small fire, Wu Jin looked at Dal with new understanding. This was not just a rescued animal that happened to be useful for survival. This was a friend who cared about his well-being enough to risk its own safety for him. "Thank you," he said softly, reaching out to stroke Dal's silver fur. Dal leaned into his touch, purring with that strange harmonic sound that made its markings glow brighter. The cub looked up at him with those intelligent blue eyes, and Wu Jin could see something in them that looked very much like love. They had become family. As if to confirm his thoughts, Dal stood up and walked to the cave entrance. The cub looked out at the night sky and made a long musical howling sound. It was the first time Wu Jin had heard Dal make that particular call. In the distance, other voices answered. Deep, powerful howls that echoed off the canyon walls. Adult shadow paws calling back to the young one. Dal returned to Wu Jin's side, but the human could see something had changed. The cub was restless now, torn between loyalty to its human friend and the pull of its own kind. Wu Jin realized their time together might be coming to an end. Sooner or later, Dal's original pack would find them. When that happened, he would have to face the most feared predators in the galaxy and try to explain why he had their young. He could only hope that the bond he had built with Dal would be enough to keep them both alive. The pack found them on a gray morning 3 weeks after the crash. Wu Jin was gathering firewood near their latest shelter when Dal suddenly went rigid beside him. The cub's markings flashed bright blue in a pattern Wu Jin had never seen before. Dal's ears swiveled toward the canyon entrance and a low whine escaped its throat. At first, Wu Jin heard nothing. Then slowly the sound reached him, the soft scrape of claws on stone. Many claws, moving with the coordinated silence that only came from predators who hunted together. Dal pressed against Wu Jin's leg, looking up at him with worried eyes. The cub made a soft trilling sound that meant follow me and started walking toward their shelter. But before they could reach it, shadows began moving on the canyon walls above them. 12 massive forms appeared on the rocks surrounding their camp. They moved like liquid darkness, flowing down the steep walls with impossible grace. Each one was the size of a small shuttle, covered in metallic fur that shifted color as they moved. Their eyes glowed like blue stars in the morning gloom. Shadow paws. A full pack. Wu Jin's hand went automatically to his weapon, then stopped. One plasma pistol against 12 apex predators was not even a gesture. It was suicide. His only chance was to show that he meant no harm. The largest shadow paw dropped to the canyon floor with silent power. She was magnificent and terrifying, her silver fur marked with swirling patterns of bright blue that pulsed like a heartbeat. Scars crossed her muzzle and shoulders, proof of countless battles. This was clearly the pack leader. She stared at Wu Jin with intelligent eyes that seemed to look right through him. Her lips pulled back slightly, revealing fangs the length of his forearm. A low growl rumbled from her throat so deep he felt it in his bones. Dal stepped between them. The little cub, barely a quarter the size of the adult, positioned itself directly in front of Wu Jin. Dal's own markings flared bright blue as it made a series of complex sounds. Whines, chirps, and soft howls that were clearly communication. The pack leader's growl faltered. She tilted her massive head, listening to Dal's explanation. Her glowing eyes shifted from the cub to Wu Jin and back again. The other pack members began moving closer, forming a loose circle around them. Wu Jin forced himself to stay perfectly still. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he knew that would trigger their hunting response. Instead, he watched Dal communicate with its birth family and tried to understand what was happening. Dal was telling them something urgent, its whole body involved in the conversation. The cub pointed its nose toward its healed leg, then toward Wu Jin. It made the happy chirping sounds it used when pleased, then pressed against Wu Jin's side in a gesture that was unmistakably protective. The pack leader stepped closer. Up close, she was even more intimidating. Her head was level with Wu Jin's chest, and he could feel the heat radiating from her body. She sniffed the air around him, her nostrils flaring as she analyzed his scent. Then she did something unexpected. She lowered her great head and sniffed Dal thoroughly, paying special attention to the leg that had been broken. Her examination was gentle but thorough, like a mother checking her child for injuries. When she was satisfied that Dal was healthy and unharmed, she looked at Wu Jin again. This time there was something different in her gaze. The immediate threat of violence had passed, replaced by curiosity and confusion. Wu Jin remembered his observations of Dal's behavior over the past weeks. Shadowpaws had complex social signals, and he had learned to recognize some of them. Slowly, carefully, he lowered his eyes and tilted his head down in what he hoped was a respectful gesture. The pack leader's ears twitched. She made a sound that was almost like a question. Dal immediately began another explanation, this one even more animated than the first. The cub demonstrated how Wu Jin had freed it from the rocks, mimicking the lifting motion with its own paws. It showed how Wu Jin had treated its injuries, holding up its healed leg. It even imitated the fishing technique Wu Jin had taught it, pawing at the air as if catching something. Slowly, understanding began to dawn in the pack leader's eyes. This strange creature had not stolen her young. It had saved its life, but the pack remained suspicious. Several of the other adults circled closer, their growls creating a rumbling harmony that made the air vibrate. One of them, a scarred male with darker markings, bared his teeth at Wu Jin and took a threatening step forward. Dal immediately placed itself between the adult male and Wu Jin, growling back with surprising ferocity for something so small. The confrontation might have escalated, but at that moment, the sky began to darken. Storm clouds were gathering with the sudden violence typical of Valdris Prime weather. The wind picked up, carrying the sharp scent of acid rain. Within minutes, they would all be caught in the open during one of the planet's deadly storms. Wu Jin looked at his shelter, a reinforced cave he had spent days preparing with waterproof barriers and air filtration. It was designed to protect one human and one small cub from the harsh weather. 12 massive shadowpaws would never fit, but he could not just leave them to face the storm unprotected. Moving slowly to avoid triggering any aggressive responses, Wu Jin walked to his shelter and began dismantling the entrance barriers. He pulled away the protective covering and removed the filtration equipment that kept the cave sealed. The pack watched in confusion as he opened his safe space to the elements. Dal seemed to understand immediately and began making excited chirping sounds, running back and forth between Wu Jin and the pack. The pack leader approached the cave entrance cautiously. She sniffed the air inside, analyzing the space. It was definitely large enough to hold the entire pack, though it would be crowded. The first drops of acid rain began to fall, hissing where they hit the rocks. The pack leader made a decision. She barked a command to her pack, and they began moving toward the shelter. Wu Jin pressed himself against the cave wall as 12 massive predators flowed past him into the protected space. They filled the cave completely, a sea of metallic fur and glowing markings. The air grew thick with their breathing and their wild scent. Dal squeezed between the adults and came to sit beside Wu Jin. The cub looked pleased with itself, as if it had orchestrated this whole meeting. Outside, the storm hit with full force. Acid rain pounded the canyon walls and lightning turned the sky green. The cave filled with the sound of heavy breathing and the soft harmonic sounds the shadowpaws made when they were calm. Slowly, the tension began to ease. The pack realized that Wu Jin had shared his only protection with them, risking his own safety for their comfort. It was an act of trust that spoke louder than any words. One of the younger pack members, a female with brighter markings, was injured. She had deep scratches along her side that looked infected. When she tried to lick the wounds clean, she whimpered with pain. Wu Jin had faced this decision before with Dal. Help a creature that could kill him, or stand by and watch it suffer. He reached for his medical kit. The injured female growled when he approached, but the pack leader made a sharp sound that seemed to mean, "Allow this." Wu Jin knelt beside the wounded shadowpaw and began cleaning her injuries with antiseptic. She was tense at first, ready to snap at him if he caused more pain, but his touch was gentle and careful, and the medicine soothed her infected wounds. Gradually she relaxed, allowing him to bandage her injuries properly. When he was finished, she looked at him with something like gratitude. She made a soft sound and briefly touched his hand with her nose before settling down to rest. The storm raged for hours. During that time, Wu Jin shared his food and water with the pack. They in turn began to include him in their social interactions. He learned that the pack leader was named something that sounded like Heywan when Dal said it. The injured female was Sora, The aggressive male who had threatened him earlier was Tae-hyun. As the storm finally began to clear, Woo Jin realized that something fundamental had changed. The pack was no longer looking at him as a threat or an enemy. He was not quite one of them, but he was not an outsider either. When dawn broke and the pack prepared to leave, Haewon approached him one last time. She studied his face with those intelligent blue eyes, then did something that shocked him. She pressed her massive head against his chest for a moment, in what could only be described as an embrace. Dal ran to his side, clearly torn between staying with Woo Jin and following its birth family. The pack began moving toward the canyon entrance, but they moved slowly, looking back. Woo Jin made his decision. He gathered his essential gear and followed them. The pack paused as he approached, watching to see what Haewon would do. The great leader looked at him for a long moment, then turned and began walking again. She did not tell him to leave. As they traveled through the canyon together, Woo Jin realized that his survival situation had completely changed. He was no longer a stranded human waiting for rescue. He was walking with the most feared predators in the galaxy, and somehow they were allowing him to stay. Dal ran beside him, its markings bright with happiness. The little cub had bridged two worlds, bringing together species that should have been natural enemies, but Woo Jin knew this was just the beginning. Living with the pack would bring new challenges and dangers. He would have to prove himself worthy of their trust every day. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he wondered what living with the pack was like, learning an entirely new way to exist. Woo Jin discovered that Shadowpaws were far more complex than any of the galactic reports had suggested. They were not just mindless predators. They had culture, language, and social structures as intricate as any sentient species he had ever studied. The pack's territory was vast, covering dozens of square kilometers of canyon systems and rocky plains. They moved through it with purposeful intelligence, following routes that took advantage of shelter, water sources, and hunting grounds. Woo Jin realized that every path had been planned over generations of pack knowledge. Haewon led them with quiet authority. She never had to raise her voice or show aggression to maintain order. The pack respected her decisions completely. When she chose their direction, they followed. When she decided where to rest, they settled immediately. When she signaled danger, every member of the pack responded instantly. Dal served as Woo Jin's translator and cultural guide. The young Shadowpaw had learned human concepts during their weeks together, and now it helped Woo Jin understand pack concepts in return. Through Dal, Woo Jin began to grasp the complex system of sounds, postures, and scent markings that the pack used to communicate. He learned that different tail positions meant different things. High and straight meant confidence. Low and tucked meant submission. Slow wagging meant contentment. The positioning of ears indicated attention and emotion. The brightness and pattern of their bioluminescent markings conveyed everything from mood to identity to pack rank. Most importantly, he learned the pack's hunting strategies. Shadowpaws were not just powerful predators. They were tactical geniuses. They could coordinate complex attacks involving multiple groups, decoy maneuvers, and environmental traps. Each pack member had specific roles based on their strengths and abilities. Woo Jin found his own role gradually emerging. He could not match the Shadowpaw's speed, strength, or natural weapons, but his human intelligence and tool-making abilities offered something unique to the pack. His first real contribution came during a hunt for the canyon elk that formed the pack's primary food source. The elk were fast and alert, with thick hides that could turn aside claws. Traditional pack tactics worked, but they were dangerous and often resulted in injuries. Woo Jin studied the elk's behavior patterns and designed a series of simple traps using principles of engineering and physics. He showed the pack how to create barriers that would funnel the elk toward waiting hunters, and how to use leverage to build pit traps that would not harm the animals but would slow them down enough for clean kills. The first time they used his trap system, the hunt was more successful than anyone had expected. The pack brought down 3 elk with no injuries and minimal energy expenditure. Even Tae-hyun, who had been the most suspicious of Woo Jin's presence, looked impressed. But Woo Jin's real test came 2 weeks after joining the pack, when their territory was invaded. The attack began just before dawn. Woo Jin was awakened by a sound he had never heard before, the entire pack growling in perfect unison, creating a harmonic rumble that made the ground vibrate. He opened his eyes to see every shadow paw on their feet, facing east toward the canyon entrance. Dal pressed against his side, markings flashing in rapid patterns that meant extreme danger. Through their bond, Wu Jin could sense the young shadow paw's fear and anger. Moving up the canyon toward them was a group of creatures that looked like living nightmares. They were called venom stalkers in the galactic databases, insectoid predators with acid for blood and neurotoxin stingers. Each one was nearly as large as a shadow paw, but where the pack hunters were graceful and intelligent, the stalkers were pure destructive hunger. There were 8 of them, moving in a loose formation that spoke of hive-mind coordination. Their exoskeletons were black as space, designed to absorb energy weapons. Their multiple eyes glowed red in the early morning light. They had come to claim the pack's territory, and they would kill every living thing in it to make their claim stick. Haywan barked a series of commands, and the pack spread out into defensive positions. They had faced stalkers before and knew the tactics needed to survive such an encounter, but Wu Jin could see the problem immediately. The pack was outnumbered, and they were fighting in terrain that favored the invaders. The stalkers moved faster than seemed possible for their size, scuttling up canyon walls and leaping between rocky outcroppings. Their acid blood meant that even successful attacks could be dangerous for the pack. One splash of that corrosive fluid could blind or cripple a shadow paw. The battle began with terrifying intensity. The stalkers attacked from multiple directions, trying to separate the pack and pick off individuals. The shadow paws fought with coordinated precision, but they were being pushed back steadily. Wu Jin watched Taehyun engage one of the largest stalkers in direct combat. The shadow paw's claws sparked against the creature's armored hide, while acid droplets from its wounds sizzled where they hit the rocks. Taehyun was skilled and experienced, but the stalker's reach advantage and toxic blood made every exchange dangerous. Sora tried to help by attacking the stalker from behind, but another invader intercepted her, its stinger flashing toward her throat. She dodged desperately, but Wu Jin could see she would not be able to avoid the next strike. Without thinking, Wu Jin acted on pure instinct. He pulled out his plasma pistol and fired at the stalker, threatening Sora. The energy blast caught the creature in its cluster of eyes, causing it to stumble backward with a shriek of pain and rage. The distraction gave Sora the opening she needed to escape, but now the wounded stalker turned its attention to Wu Jin. It moved toward him with frightening speed, acid dripping from its mandibles. Dal leaped to intercept it, but the young shadow paw was too small to do more than slow the monster down. Wu Jin found himself face to face with a creature designed by evolution to kill efficiently. But Wu Jin was an engineer, and engineers solved problems. The canyon walls around them were composed of sedimentary rock layers, held together by mineral deposits that his scanner had identified weeks ago. The right application of force at the right point could bring down tons of stone. Wu Jin aimed his plasma pistol not at the stalker, but at a specific point on the canyon wall 20 meters above it. The energy beam struck the weakness he had identified, and physics did the rest. A section of cliff face collapsed, crushing the stalker beneath several tons of rock. The avalanche also created a barrier that separated the remaining invaders from the pack, giving the shadow paws time to regroup. Inspired by his example, the pack began using the terrain more creatively. They lured stalkers into positions where loose rocks could be triggered, or where narrow passages would prevent the creatures from using their numerical advantage. The battle turned into a war of tactics rather than pure violence. And in a contest of intelligence and planning, the shadow paws had clear advantages. One by one, the stalkers fell or retreated. The last invader, badly wounded and alone, tried to escape by climbing the canyon walls. Haywan herself pursued it, her powerful legs carrying her up the near vertical stone face. She caught the fleeing creature at the canyon rim and ended the threat with surgical precision. When the battle was over, the pack gathered around their wounded. 2 members had suffered injuries from acid burns, and several others bore cuts from the stalker's claws. But they were all alive, which was more than many pack encounters with stalkers could claim. Wu Jin immediately went to work treating the injured. His medical supplies were limited, but his knowledge of chemistry helped him neutralize the acid burns and clean the wounds properly. The pack watched him work with growing respect. Sora, the female he had treated during the storm, approached him as he finished bandaging Taehyun's wounds. She looked directly into his eyes and made a sound that was unmistakably grateful. Then she did something that shocked him. She lowered her head and briefly licked his hand, the same gesture she would use to thank a packmate. Tae-hyun, the male who had been most suspicious of Woo Jin's presence, made a rumbling sound deep in his chest. When Woo Jin looked at him questioningly, Dal translated with excited chirps. Tae-hyun was acknowledging that Woo Jin had saved his life. But the most significant moment came when Haewon returned from her pursuit of the final stalker. She surveyed the aftermath of the battle, checking on each pack member and examining the tactical situation. Her intelligent eyes took in the collapsed cliff face, the strategic positioning of the remaining stalkers, and the fact that all her pack members were alive and relatively unharmed. She approached Woo Jin slowly, her massive form radiating power and authority. For a moment, he thought she might challenge him for taking independent action during the battle. Pack dynamics were complex, and he might have overstepped some boundary he did not understand. Instead, Haewon did something that left him speechless. She pressed her forehead against his chest, her eyes closing in a gesture of complete trust. Then she stepped back and made a long, complex vocalization that caused every member of the pack to respond in harmony. Dal's markings blazed with excitement as the young Shadowpaw explained what had just happened. Haewon had formally recognized Woo Jin as a pack member, not an honorary member, Oro. The rescue ship arrived on a bright morning exactly 2 months after Woo Jin's crash. He was teaching Dal advanced hunting signals when the pack's sentries began making urgent warning calls. Every Shadowpaw in the territory looked up at the sky, where a sleek human vessel was descending through the atmosphere with controlled precision. Woo Jin felt his heart race as he watched his own kind approach. For weeks he had dreamed of this moment, but now that rescue was actually here, he found himself torn between relief and an unexpected sadness. The ship landed in a clearing near the canyon entrance, its engine sending clouds of dust and debris into the air. The pack retreated to higher ground, watching the strange craft with suspicious eyes. They had never seen human technology up close, and their instincts told them it could be dangerous. Dal pressed against Woo Jin's side, sensing his conflicted emotions. The young Shadowpaw's markings flickered between blue patterns that meant happiness and red ones that meant distress. Dal was as confused as Woo Jin about what this arrival meant for their relationship. The ship's boarding ramp lowered, and 5 figures in environmental suits emerged. Woo Jin recognized the lead suit's insignia, Captain Lee Suman of the rescue vessel, Homeward. She had probably been searching for him since his emergency beacon first activated. The rescue team moved cautiously, their weapons ready but not drawn. They had obviously detected the pack's presence and were trying not to provoke an incident. Their sensors would be showing them 12 massive life forms surrounding their position, each one registering as a potential threat. Woo Jin stood up slowly, making sure his movements were visible to both his rescuers and his pack family. He could feel the tension in the air like an electric charge. One wrong move from either side could turn this reunion into a tragedy. "Captain Lee," he called out, his voice carrying clearly in the thin air. "Thank you for coming to get me." The rescue team spun toward his voice, and he could see their shock even through the tinted visors of their helmets. They had expected to find a survivor, possibly injured or traumatized. They had not expected to find him standing calmly among the galaxy's most feared predators. "Engineer Kang?" Captain Lee's voice came through her suit's external speakers. "Are you hurt? Are you being held captive?" Woo Jin almost smiled at the question. "No, Captain. I am not a prisoner. These are my friends." He gestured toward the pack, and several of the Shadowpaws moved closer in response. The rescue team immediately raised their weapons, but Woo Jin quickly stepped between them and the pack. "Do not shoot," he said firmly. "They will not hurt you unless you threaten them first." Dal moved to stand beside him, the young Shadowpaw's presence somehow making the situation both more tense and more comprehensible. Here was clear evidence that Woo Jin had not just survived among the predators, but had formed genuine bonds with them. Captain Lee slowly lowered her weapon, though her team remained ready for action. "Engineer Kang, we need to get you out of here immediately. These creatures are extremely dangerous." "They saved my life," Woo Jin replied. "Multiple times." As if responding to some unspoken signal, Haewon emerged from behind a boulder and began walking toward the humans. The rescue team tensed, but the pack leader's approach was clearly non-threatening. She moved with calm dignity, her head held high and her markings pulsing in steady blue patterns. She stopped 3 meters from the humans and sat down, demonstrating that she meant no harm. Then she looked directly at Captain Lee and made a soft sound that was unmistakably a greeting. The captain stared at the massive predator in amazement. "It is trying to communicate." "She is communicating," Wu Jin corrected. "Her name is Hei-Wan and she is the pack leader. She is welcoming you to their territory." Over the next hour, Wu Jin served as translator and mediator between two species that had never truly met as equals. The rescue team gradually lowered their weapons as they realized the Shadowpaws posed no immediate threat. The pack in turn began to relax as they sensed that these new humans were not planning to attack. Captain Lee peppered Wu Jin with questions about his survival, his relationship with the pack, and the Shadowpaws' capabilities. Her scientific curiosity quickly overcame her initial fear as she realized the implications of what she was witnessing. "This changes everything," she said as she watched Dal demonstrate its understanding of spoken Korean. "First contact protocols, interspecies relations, our entire understanding of these creatures. You have achieved something that xenobiologists thought was impossible." But even as she spoke, Wu Jin could see the conflict in her eyes. She had orders to bring him home, and those orders did not account for his unusual circumstances. "You have to come with us," she said finally. "The terraforming project needs you, and your family thinks you are dead. You have responsibilities." Wu Jin looked at Dal, then at the pack members who had become his adopted family. Hei-Wan watched the exchange with intelligent eyes, clearly understanding that some kind of decision was being made about his future. "What if I do not want to leave?" he asked. Captain Lee's expression softened with sympathy. "I understand that you have formed attachments here, but you are human, Engineer Kang. You belong with your own species." That night, as the rescue team made camp near their ship, Wu Jin sat with the pack and tried to process his impossible situation. Dal curled up beside him, sensing his emotional turmoil. The other pack members gathered close, offering silent support. Through Dal, Hei-Wan communicated a complex message. The pack understood that Wu Jin had to make a choice between two families. Whatever he decided, they would accept it. But they wanted him to know that he would always have a place with them. As Wu Jin lay awake that night, staring at the stars through the canyon opening, he realized that he did not have to choose between his human identity and his pack family. He could find a way to honor both. The next morning, he presented his proposal to Captain Lee. "I will come with you," he said, "but I want to establish a permanent research station here. The galaxy needs to learn about the Shadowpaws, and they need someone who can speak for them in interspecies councils." Captain Lee considered the idea carefully. It would be unprecedented and dangerous. "Everything worth doing is dangerous," Wu Jin replied. "But think about what we could accomplish. These creatures are intelligent, cooperative, and incredibly capable. They could be allies instead of just threats to avoid." The captain agreed to present his proposal to the Terraforming Authority and the Galactic Council. In the meantime, she would file a preliminary first contact report that would protect the pack's territory from interference. When it came time to leave, the goodbye was both heartbreaking and hopeful. Each pack member approached Wu Jin individually, touching him with nose or paw in their traditional farewell gesture. Dal was the last, and the young Shadowpaw's distress was obvious in its rapidly flickering markings. "I will come back," Wu Jin promised, kneeling to embrace his first friend on Valdris Prime. "This is not goodbye forever," Dal chirped once, a sound that meant trust in their shared language. 6 months later, Wu Jin returned to Valdris Prime as the galaxy's first official interspecies liaison. His temporary research station had grown into a permanent facility, staffed by xenobiologists, diplomats, and cultural specialists from a dozen different worlds. Dal had grown into a magnificent adult, his markings now showing the complex patterns that indicated high status within the pack. But when he saw Wu Jin emerge from the transport ship, the young Shadowpaw abandoned all dignity and raced across the canyon floor like an excited puppy. The reunion was joyful and emotional, but it was also the beginning of something much larger. Within a year, the first formal treaties between human space and the Shadowpaw territories were signed. Within 5 years, joint human Shadowpaw teams were working on terraforming projects across the galaxy. Other species, initially skeptical of humanity's claims about Shadowpaw intelligence and cooperation, gradually began to accept the evidence. Some even requested human mediation in their own interspecies conflicts. recognizing humanity's unique talent for building bridges between different forms of life. The research station became a symbol of what was possible when species chose cooperation over conflict. Visitors came from across the galaxy to study the human Shadowpaw partnership and learn about successful interspecies integration. Wu Jin, now bearing the official title of Interspecies Cultural Ambassador, split his time between the station and trips to other worlds where his expertise was needed. But he always returned to Valdris Prime, where Dal and the pack remained his closest family. On quiet evenings, he would sit with Dal on the canyon rim and watch the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Ships passed overhead regularly now, carrying diplomats and researchers and traders between the various allied worlds. The galaxy had become a smaller, more connected place. Do you ever regret it? He asked Dal one evening. Choosing to trust a strange creature who fell from the sky? Dal made the soft trilling sound that meant contentment and pressed against his side. The young Shadowpaw's markings pulsed in the pattern that meant family in their visual language. Wu Jin smiled and scratched behind Dal's ears, a gesture that still made the powerful predator purr like a kitten. I do not regret it either.